Welcome to my channel, The Untamed Savior. The hidden way horses communicate. They say horses are simple creatures. Great, powerful animals whose world is one of instinct, of flight, and of simple, audible cues. We see the dramatic swish of a tail, the deliberate, ground-shaking stomp of a hoof, the loud, honest whinny that echoes across the wide, open plains. And we think we understand. We think that is the whole story, a straightforward equation of action and immediate, visible reaction. But in that quick assumption, in that casual simplification, we miss the entire, immense universe unfolding beneath the surface of their quiet strength. We fail to comprehend the immense complexity of a species that has survived for millennia by mastering the art of silence, by learning to speak volumes without ever uttering a sound that might betray their presence. It is a language of life and death, distilled into the most minute physical adjustments. What if the real conversation, the most profound, deeply emotional dialogue, was happening in the silence? What if these creatures, so used to being seen for their speed, their power, and their sheer physical presence, are actually the most sophisticated masters of an invisible language, a secret world of micro-gestures, subtle signals, and emotional cues so quick, so faint, so entirely internalized that the hurried, distracted human eye passes right over them. This is not just nonverbal communication. This is a highly refined, almost spiritual dialect spoken at the cellular level. It is a language of immediate truth, where there is no time for hesitation or deceit, only for crystal clarity and instantaneous understanding among the herd. This is Dr. Elias Vance. For 20 years, he has stood quietly at the intersection of rigid, empirical science and the fluid, intuitive soul of the natural world, patiently watching the things that move too fast for us to notice. He started naturally like everyone else, looking at the big, obvious actions, the aggressive flare of the nostrils of exertion, the dramatically flattened ears of open aggression, the wide stance of alert vigilance. But Elias soon realized the meaning. The true lexicon of their intent was in the margins. The hidden grammar of the horse was not in the movements meant for human attention, but in the rapid, subtle shifts meant only for the herd or for their own internal self-regulation. He understood, fundamentally and instinctively, that when a prey animal speaks, it cannot afford the vulnerability of being loud. Loud attracts predators. Loud means exposure, and exposure means death. For a horse, volume is a luxury, an exception to the rule, reserved only for the most urgent calls. So, the language had to evolve, silent, immediate, and utterly sincere, transmitting information with the speed of thought. A shift of weight so minute it registers only as a faint shadow on the flank, a slight, almost imperceptible tightening of the mouth, a fraction of a second movement of the nostril. These were forgotten dialects, the essential chapters of the behavioral science textbooks that had been left unwritten, dismissed as noise or random twitches. The mainstream scientific community, obsessed with models and statistics, had looked for the thunder and ignored the dewdrop. But Elias knew the most important things are rarely the loudest. The most profound truths whisper, and you must silence your own world to hear them. He called it the quiet code, and his life's work was not just to decode it, but to use that knowledge to bridge the ancient, aching gap between species, to teach humanity how to truly listen. His equipment was not revolutionary, but his application was revolutionary. He utilized high-speed, high-definition cameras and thermal imaging, focused not on the thunder's gallop, but on the delicate musculature around the eye, the tiny, telling flicker of the lip, the changes in capillary blood flow. He filmed horses interacting, resting, eating, and reacting to novel stimuli. He wanted a dictionary of stillness, a comprehensive thesaurus of nuance, mapped directly onto their emotional state. Elias needed a collaborator, a translator whose hands knew, in a visceral, bodily sense, what Elias's mind was trying to prove. This is Sarah Jensen. She has spent her entire life not just training horses, but listening to them with every fiber of her being. She relied on gut feeling, the deep, non-rational empathy that guides all great animal partnerships. She saw the flick of an ear, but she couldn't articulate why it mattered, only that she knew, with complete certainty, the moment the horse's mind shifted. She felt the subtle shift in the air, the precognitive tension that preceded a kick or a calm surrender. Her wisdom was innate, born 1,000 of hours in the field, a deep, cellular memory of how horses operate. But for science to accept it, the intuition had to be quantified. Sarah's challenge was immediate and intensely human. How do you train the world to see something it's conditioned to ignore? She knew the horses were communicating constantly, an endless, dense stream of nonverbal information. But her methods, while undeniably effective, were deemed too subjective by science. Elias's cameras, however, offered an objective lens, a cold, hard measurement of what the heart had already known. The synergy between the scientist and the trainer was critical, a perfect partnership. Sarah provided the what and when of behavior in real time. Elias provided the how and how fast in the lab. We began by isolating the microgestures. We filmed horses in every emotional state imaginable, grazing peacefully, sensing a distant storm long before clouds arrived, encountering a new rival in the pasture, feeling safe and secure with a familiar human. The sheer volume of data, when analyzed frame by frame, was staggering. What looked like a random movement at normal speed, when slowed down to 1,000 frames per second, revealed perfect, repeatable patterns, a grammar as precise as any spoken language. It was a secret language, spoken with the utmost grammatical precision, waiting to be deciphered. They found that a slight, forward-pointing ear, a tiny movement before the sound of a footstep even reached them, was a universal warning, not a fear, but focused attention, a state of intense mental processing. The ear became a directional compass of intent and mental focus. When the ear was relaxed, facing slightly outward, it signaled profound disinterest and emotional settling, a declaration of safety and peace. They also discovered that distress was signaled by a near-invisible tremor in the upper lip and a rapid, shallow change in the rhythm of breathing. The horse was taking short, high breaths, preparing the vast lung capacity for the anaerobic effort flight. Even while standing perfectly still, the flight mechanism was already being primed. And then there was a nostril bloom. That's what Elias named it. Not the wide, obvious flaring of a horse in full run, the gasp for oxygen, but a delicate, quiet opening, sustained for just over a second. It didn't signal fear or rage. It signaled deep curiosity and openness to connection. The surrounding muscles relaxed. The tiny hairs on the edge of the nostril seemed to settle, pointing slightly forward. It was a horse's most intimate invitation, their way of saying, I am safe and I am interested in your presence. I will take in this moment entirely without judgment. Elias provided the science, the undeniable, quantifiable proof that the invisible was real. Sarah provided the intuition, the essential context that explained why a particular signal was used at a particular moment in the social dynamic. They were connecting two worlds that desperately needed each other, the cold logic of the lab and profound wisdom of the earth. They realized that what humans perceived as a moment of stillness in the horse was, in fact, the most intense period of communication, a constant, silent broadcast. Then they met the challenge that would test everything they had learned, everything they believed about the power of nonverbal communication, pushing their decoding of the quiet code to its limits. Her name was Luna. Luna was a rescue, a young mare. She had been severely mistreated, likely starved and beaten, and had learned through brutal, repeated conditioning that the human world meant pain and utter unpredictability. Her system was in perpetual overdrive. She was intensely reactive, perpetually nervous, and utterly closed off. Every attempt at approach from a human was met with a violent, panic reaction, A sudden spin, a threatened kick that was more desperate than malicious, a wild, wide-eyed scramble for space. She was, quite literally, beyond speech, having given up on the possibility of a kind human voice. She had learned to communicate only through the language of defense and distance. Sarah watched Luna with a deep ache of sympathy and a growing frustration with the limits of conventional training. Luna was a lock without a key. She had built walls so high that a loud voice or sudden movement just became more brick and mortar for her defenses. The conventional language of training, the firm voice, the assertive posture, the quick corrections, was worse than useless here. It only validated her deepest, most primal fear. We needed a conversation that could bypass her defenses, one she couldn't possibly hear with her ears, but could only feel with her body. A conversation that was so gentle, so entirely non-confrontational, that it couldn't possibly trigger her flight response. If the quiet code was real, if the silent language truly existed as a path to earn trust, then Luna was the ultimate necessary and heartbreaking test case. They had to speak to her in a voice she had never learned to fear. They had to speak in absolute silence. They started with the basics of safety. How do you signal absolute, total non-threat to a mind conditioned for flight? The science said it wasn't about the absence of motion. That was merely stillness. It was about the kind of motion or the specific lack thereof. They needed to counteract the horse's ingrained expectation of human dominance and predatory intent. The key signal for safety was a very slow, deliberate blink combined with a half-lowered head, mimicking a relaxed, non-predatory grazer, whose vigilance is momentarily, safely suspended. They called the counter gesture the slow blink. It's a message that says, "My guard is down. I trust the world enough to close my eyes in your presence. I pose no threat to you, and I am asking you to receive my vulnerability." It was a precise opposite of the sustained, direct human stare, which to a horse is the look of a predator locking onto its prey, the ultimate act of invasion. The air in the paddock, even 20 feet away, was thick with tension. Every fiber of Luna's body was coiled, a spring ready to explode. Sarah stopped a good distance away, turned sideways to remove any confrontational, two-dimensional threat, and simply began the gestures. She was speaking with her entire, regulated being, trying to transmit calm across the void. Nothing happened for a long time. Then, something happened. After 10 minutes of motionless communication from Sarah, of holding the posture of absolute, unyielding peace, Luna's nose twitched. It was tiny a flicker, but Elias, watching through the high-speed camera, knew. She saw it. She registered the signal. It was the first, infinitesimally small crack in the fortress of her fear. The communication had landed in her nervous system. Days turned into weeks. Sarah persisted with unwavering, quiet patience, showing up every day to offer the same message of peace. She repeated the language of safety over and over. They started building a more complex silent vocabulary. To signal permission to approach, Sarah used a nostril bloom, gently relaxing her own face muscles, taking a deliberate, full breath, letting her own anxiety settle deep within her core. To signal, "You are okay," and alleviate pressure, she would shift her weight backward, away from Luna, signaling that she was ready to retreat at any instant, giving the horse the precious gift of self-determination and control over the distance. It was like learning to speak a foreign language one syllable at a time, except the syllables were not sound, but feeling. Sarah was learning to communicate with her own body's inner state, regulating her entire physiology. She wasn't pretending to be calm. She had to become calm, because the horse could read the difference. Instantly, they could read the tremor of an insincere muscle, the slight increase in heart rate, the microscopic tension in the jaw. The horse's silent language is the ultimate lie detector, demanding total honesty. Luna had only ever known the big, loud, terrifying parts of humans. The sudden movements, the yelling, the hurried pace of expectation. Now, she was meeting a human who spoke in whispers, in breaths, in quiet acts of profound, non-demanding respect. For the first time, Luna wasn't being asked to submit. She was being invited to join a conversation. She was being offered a relationship based on mutual vulnerability and guaranteed safety. The distance between them slowly, agonizingly, began to shrink. Then came the breakthrough moment, the culmination of silent weeks. Sarah stood still, rooted in peace. Luna took 3 steps forward, hesitated, her entire body questioning the impulse, and then, slowly, deliberately, offered her muzzle towards Sarah's still, waiting hand. The contact was feather-light, barely there, a testament to the trust she was tentatively offering. The moment the skin touched was not one of forced submission, but of mutual agreement. It was a silent, profound acknowledgement that the messages had been received, understood, and trusted enough to risk contact. Elias and Sarah exchanged a look of profound, silent relief. The tension around Luna's eyes had softened dramatically, the deep, anxious lines smoothing out like disturbed water, finally settling into a clear pool. The difference was not in Luna's strength, which had always been formidable. The difference was in her willingness. The invisible language had not commanded her. It had simply invited her to be safe. It had given her a roadmap back to her own inherent, natural calm. This wasn't just about training one nervous horse. This was about proving that the emotional depth we had always suspected in animals was governed by a sophisticated, decipherable code. They weren't just reacting to us. They were actively, continuously talking to us, presenting themselves in a state of open, constant dialogue. We just didn't have the ears trained to hear, or the eyes trained to see beyond our own internal noise and distractions. The connection was established not through dominance, speed, or force, but through decoding the sacred need for safety. The barrier was broken. The conversation had, finally, truly begun. Understanding a language in a quiet, controlled paddock is one thing. Relying on it in the chaotic, high-pressure reality of the outside world is another. They needed to test if Luna's newfound trust was durable enough. If the quiet code could hold under the immense pressure that had once broken her spirit. They chose a large, unfamiliar covered arena with multiple unpredictable distractions, flags, echoes, strange equipment. Luna was led into the huge, echoing space. Her attention instantly returned, amplified by the unfamiliar acoustics and smells. Ears twitching nervously, head darting, seeking the exit, searching for threats. The distractions were everywhere. Loud fans, sudden movements outside the walls, the distant, challenging smell of unfamiliar horses. Luna was reverting to her old, established programming. Her breathing became rapid, her eyes wide with panic, and her body language screamed, "Flight! Escape now!" This was the ultimate moment of truth. Sarah stood still, about 10 feet from Luna. She had to use the newly decoded language to bring Luna back from the edge of panic without touching her or making a sound. The communication had to be perfect, flawlessly authentic, or they risked sending Luna back into the deep, dark well of her trauma. The stakes were everything they had worked for. Sarah's body performed the ultimate, precise sentence of safety. The slow blink, held for a count of 5. The half-head lower, a humble dip that removed all perceived height and superiority. The nostril bloom, a deep, full, slow breath of exhaled peace. Followed by the most powerful signal of non-intent. The shoulder drop, a relaxation of the upper back muscles, signaling the complete absence of any predatory or confrontational posture, removing all tension from her core. Sarah's internal state had to be absolute peace. Any flicker of human fear, impatience, or frustration would be immediately read by Luna as danger, instantly invalidating the entire exchange. This was not performance. It was a deeply honest transmission of feeling, one that required Sarah to regulate her own nervous system to match the frequency of profound calm she was trying to transmit. The silence was immense, almost painful, heavy with possibility and risk. Luna's body trembled, caught between the sheer, terrifying instinct to flee and the dawning memory of safety Sarah was broadcasting. Luna was searching desperately for the lie in Sarah's posture, the hidden aggression, the betrayal she had learned to expect from every human. But all she could read was the quiet, persistent message, "I am safe. You are safe. There is no threat here. We are together in this moment of vulnerability." The change in Luna happened in a powerful, undeniable wave, a cascading release of tension that started at her muzzle. The deep, anxious lip tremor stopped. Her neck lowered a fraction of an inch, releasing the rigid stiffness in her spine. Then the ultimate signal. Her ears swiveled backward, not pinned in aggression, but facing Sarah, a sign of prioritizing Sarah's presence and communication over the terrifying, chaotic distractions outside. She was recentering on the island of safety that Sarah represented. She wasn't just calming down through exhaustion. She was choosing to trust. She was using the language to actively respond, to re-engage with a terrifying world through the filter of a trusted translator. Sarah then took one slow, small step toward Luna, maintaining the posture of peace. Luna remained calm. Sarah used the signal for approach aloud, a gentle tilt of the head, a soft, deliberate exhalation that cleared the air, and Luna took a step forward in return. Not out of obligation, not out of training, but out of choice. It was a negotiation conducted entirely in the silence, a profound agreement to move past trauma and into partnership. What they had achieved was a monumental shift in understanding, not just for them, but for the entire field of animal behavior. It proved that a horse, even one that had every reason to fear, could be reached and healed, not with force or dominance, but with a perfectly calibrated respect. The language of the horse was one of vulnerability, and the human response had to meet that vulnerability with authentic, quiet peace. It's not magic, Elias would say later. It's science, the physics of peace. But it feels like magic. The science shows us the gestures. But the connection, that's all heart. You realize the horse is waiting for you to be honest, waiting for you to lower your guard and speak the truth of your own presence, your own state of being. They reviewed the footage later, dissecting every frame of the crisis and the resolution. They isolated the moment of Luna's shift. They realized a powerful, beautiful truth. The most critical moment wasn't when Luna moved forward physically. It was a microsecond before the movement, when her breathing shifted from shallow, high-alert gasp to a deep, slow exhalation, the kind that releases tension from the diaphragm. That physiological shift was her decision, the moment her body chose peace over panic. They now had the code. They could potentially manipulate it. They could use it to force compliance, to turn a sophisticated dialect into a series of coercive, invisible commands. But they made an immediate, profound moral decision. This language was not for control. It was for connection. It was a tool for mutual understanding, not for dominance. The knowledge they had unlocked came with solemn responsibility to teach it with reverence, ensuring that future interactions between horses and humans would be based on empathy, not exploitation. They had proven that the path to a profound bond lay not in demanding the horse speak our language of noise and haste, but in taking the long, quiet road to learn theirs, to become fluent in the language of honesty and intention. Luna's story became the foundation of their work, the central, undeniable pillar of their philosophy. She was living proof that the deepest, most invisible wounds can be healed by the quietest conversation. The discovery of the quiet code didn't just change how they trained. It changed how they saw the world, revealing a profound, unbroken interconnectedness that transcended species boundaries. They realized this wasn't just a language for horses. It was a template for all deep connection, a searing reminder of the power of nonverbal honesty. How often do we rush past the subtle cues of those we love? The flicker of an eye, the tightness in a shoulder, the hesitant posture, because we are too busy waiting for the loud, clear, simple word. We demand explanations in volume when the truth is so often found in the tremor. The horse, with its magnificent vulnerability, teaches us that trust is a posture. It is a constant, subtle offering of safety, an open invitation to share space without the need for defense. They taught Elias and Sarah that every creature on this earth, from the smallest bird to the mightiest stallion, speaks a secret language of feeling, waiting only for an observer with the patience to slow down, regulate their own internal world, and truly see the world through their eyes. We spend so much of our lives trying to control our external world, projecting our anxieties and expectations onto others, rushing and dominating. But the horse shows us that the most powerful, most consequential thing we can control is our internal state, because that is the true, honest broadcast the world receives from us. Your peace is contagious. Your anxiety is immediately and profoundly felt. The hidden way horses communicate is not a parlor trick or a mere scientific curiosity. It is a profound, life-altering truth that the world's deepest, most meaningful connections are always built in the quiet, sacred space between two souls who have finally chosen to listen, not with their ears, not with words, but with their entire presence. It is the truth that the gentlest of gestures can hold the greatest, most transformative power. We came looking for the hidden language of the horse, and we found the path back to the deepest, most honest language of the human heart. True listening is not waiting for your turn to speak. It is creating a silence in which the other can finally be safe enough to whisper their truth.